please excuse me, those of you who think there's going to be a lot about the team itself here, but if you know my work, I'm going to focus on the sponsorship. But I think this is really important. Okay, so as Leslie told us, the Colorado Silver Bullets took the field in 1994, and they constituted the first fully professional women's baseball team to play since the demise of the All-American Professional, et cetera, 4 years, 4 decades earlier. They were named for the Coors Brewing Company's entry into the light beer category, the result of a roughly $2.7 million sponsorship deal. Sources differ on the exact amount, but it was somewhere around there. So the team was inextricably linked to the product. Coors Light, introduced in 1978, was branded the Silver Bullet, a reference to the product's silver cans, so designed to distinguish the reduced calorie, low alcohol brew from Coors Banquet, the brewery's classic American golden lager. Okay. Um, by the brewery's account, Coors Light was a robust brand in the early 1990s. Company president Peter H. Coors claimed that sales topped 10 million barrels in 1989. So he noted that his product was the fastest growing premium light beer in America last year. And all indicators suggest that this trend continues. I gotta say, I think that's suspicious. I think it was probably Bud Light, but what I noticed looking over the records is these brewers say whatever they want to promote their brands, they will say whatever they want. Okay. So why was Coors moved to sponsor a women's baseball team? After all, brewers and marketers of light beer as a product category fought hard for 2 decades prior to the team launch to project an image of American masculinity. That was what it was all about. And their other sports sponsorships bore this out. So look at Coors Light. It became the official light beer of NASCAR in 1988. They would have been an official light beer of the NFL, but Bud Light paid more, and Coors Light was actually banned from the Super Bowl. And I don't know if banned is the word I would use. They lost their sponsorship in 1990. So clearly the answer isn't altruism or a genuine investment in the cause of women's sports. If we think about it in the context of marketing and branding, the silver bullets seem to have been off message, at least on the surface. But when we look closely at the company history and the ways in which Coors used women in their advertising, I think there may be a rationale for the connection between the product and the team. I'd like to add that this is very much a work in progress. I hope to develop this into an article or a chapter. And so I'll see where it goes. Okay, so the Silver Bullets were the brainchild of one Bob Hope. Before you get excited, I mean the sports marketing guy, not the actor. Okay. He was president of Whittle Communications and in 1992 was inspired to get into the business of women's baseball by seeing A League of Their Own or seeing its impressive box office receipts. But unlike the fictional version of the AAAGPBL featured in the film, Hope Silver Bullets did not play in a league of their own. They would uh, and they would only, I'm sorry, they would only play against men. And this was kind of problematic from the get-go. The fact that they weren't going to play with women, they were going to play with men. So this sets up a whole gender dynamic. Okay. According to and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Gay Berlage. Hope was once described by Sports Illustrated as the most innovative promoter in sports. And she says, his experience in public relations and marketing director for the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Hawks may have given him the experience with creating gimmicks to attract the public to men's baseball games, but it ill prepared him to deal with marketing women. By having the Silver Bullets play only men's team, Hope unknowingly doomed them to failure. For the archaic battle of the sexes promotion to be successful, the women had to be as skilled as the men. They could not be judged on their own merit, the way, say, the 1996 women's Olympic basketball team was, but only in relation to the larger, stronger, and vastly more experienced men they were to play against. Because most of them were not experienced, as we know, women did not have that many opportunities to play baseball. So most of them had experience in softball, but not playing baseball, and certainly not against professional, semi-pro, college, and military men. I actually think this was part of Coors' plan. I don't think part of Whittle's plan, but part of Coors' plan. Let me just put that out there. In the meantime, founded a little bit about Coors, because we have to understand them. Coors Brewing Company had been looking a way to enter the arena of women's sports as a way to, and this is a quote, promote women's rights, if they were to be believed. Okay, a little company history will belie this notion that they were looking to promote anything other than white men. Okay, they were founded in 1873 and quickly revived after the repeal of Prohibition in 1933. They introduced Coors Light in 1978, in 1978 to compete with Miller Lite, the brand which successfully created the category. Note the emphasis on successfully, because this was not the first light beer ever. In fact, that was a Coors beer. And their first foray was in 1941. It didn't necessarily, and this is a crate from the original Coors Light. You can see they still used, they already had their logo and all the Rocky Mountain spring water stuff. But this was a 1941 crate of Coors Light. Okay. It didn't exactly blow anyone's socks off. Nobody bought it. And compounded by wartime grain shortages, it doomed this particular beer. In 1967, Rheingold introduced a so-called diet beer called Gablingers, marketed naturally to women. It didn't work. The company may or may not have given its formula to Meisterbrau. Meisterbrau claims it was originally their formula. You know how this stuff goes. And that was of Chicago. This also obviously targeted women. If you look at that six-pack, I mean, aren't we all running out to lose weight by drinking this lovely diet beer? I mean, you know, diet beer. Anyway, when Meisterbrau went bankrupt in 1972, it sold its product line to Miller, and so Miller Lite was born. So this became Miller Lite, and this is this is actually pretty important. So Miller introduced its brew locally in 1973, and it went national in 1975. It associated its product with masculinity, and by doing so with men's sports. Okay. Miller Lite commercials featured athletes such as Bubba Smith, Joe Frazier, and famously Bob Uecker, who introduced the Uecker seats in a Miller Lite spot, as well as comic Rodney Dangerfield and notoriously misogynistic hard-boiled mystery writer Mickey Spillane, who we see here with, feminist Billy Martin. trying to sell light beer. And it was also a host of other tough guys arguing whether the beer tasted great or was less filling. This is considered a great landmark slogan, but Coors Light was using something similar before that. And so if you go all the way back, was Rheingold beer, or was it Ballantine? I can't remember, but there's a shot in the movie Marty that shows a beer sign which suggests it not quite that way, but it's basically says taste great, less filling. I should have put it in here. All right. Uh, these commercials were somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but they successfully sold the beer as a signifier of maleness. Coors Light was also associated with men and sports in its early ads. Men diving, water skiing, surfing, all the while surrounded by silent, adoring, bikini-clad women. In the early 1990s, the very avatar of American masculinity, here we see him, John Wayne, was featured in a landmark Coors Light ad placed in an all-male military setting. When women were actually featured participating in sports in Coors Light's ads, they were sexualized. Please tell me, do any of the men here playing with this woman have a bared midriff like she does? And there are several other women in this commercial participating, but they become increasingly more scantily clad. All right, because you can't have a woman playing with men if she's not showing off her midsection. All right. So even without the competition from Miller Lite, uh, the mid-70s was not exactly what we would call a banner year for Coors. Coors Light hit the market in the midst of a nationwide boycott of the company and all its products. In 1973, reacting to their notoriously discriminatory and anti-labor practices, San Francisco Teamsters Local 88, and here they are, representing delivery drivers, struck the Colorado company. Local 88 allied itself closely with the city's burgeoning LGBTQIA plus communities. Since California amounted to Coors' largest consumer base, the strike and accompanying boycott hurt the company's reputation as well as its bottom line. So too did its sponsorship of Anita Bryant. And I can't go back into too much LGBTQIA plus history, but Anita Bryant was definitely not an ally. And this actually hurt them nationally, not just with local people in San Francisco, but in general, there were a lot of people who might have drunk Coors Light who really preferred to not do so as a result of the company's policy. Adolf Coors, the second, I think it was, had Nazi affiliations. They were a really great group of people. Um, just as Coors was becoming a national brand rather than a local one, the boycott became national too. And Coors had been facing boycotts since the 1960s for their racist practices. And boycotting, protest, and also their extreme sexism and ethnocentrism. Okay, now given this, it seems unlikely that the Silver Bullets were formed as a move to promote women's rights. Rather, it seems to me to have been a ploy on the part of Coors to change its toxic reputation from one of bigotry to one of open-mindedness in the face of continuing boycotts. But was changing reputation enough? Of corporate sponsorship of women's sports, Nancy Luff writes, typically corporations have established criteria which have been well documented. Specific criteria cited as the most important, and this is for companies to sponsor women's sports: affinity factor, sanctioning organization, potential for merchandising, potential for press coverage, growth trend, timing, current sponsors, and a match between product and event. At the outset, at the outset, the Silver Bullets as a promotional or as a team to be sponsored met nearly every criteria. The team was sanctioned to play by the National Association of Professional Baseball Leagues, although after being blown out 19-0 by the independent Northern League All-Stars in their first game, they dropped out of play against professional men's teams. The potential for merchandising was never really realized. And if you look here, you can see that the lower ad be underneath the spam collectibles is trying to sell Silver Bullets merch. And here they really missed out on an opportunity because if you can imagine, all those girls and women wearing Silver Bullets caps and tees while drinking their Coors Light from frosty Silver Bullets mugs, that would have really done something for Coors, but they never took it that far. So here you have this. This is from Spin magazine, the music magazine, kind of in the back of the book. All right. Press coverage, though not overwhelming, and actually not really all that positive some of the times. This was actually from an op-ed from the New York Times. It's not as, and it was written by a woman, it's not as bad as, it's not as negative as you would think. It's really a very, it's more of a come on headline because it basically is saying, if you were going to have this league, you would want to see them playing women. I think that makes, what we've been saying. Okay. Press coverage. All right. Even the Women's Wear Daily actually featured a very positive article on the team. And then there was Sports Center, which did a whole positive feature. Okay. And as for the affinity factor, the connection between women's sports and Coors, the team itself appeared to be an attempt to build an affinity with the brewery that definitely did not exist in 1994. At the outset, it worked. Oh, let me go back. Let's look at this. At the outset, it worked, and at least from the promotional angle. The Silver Bullets were not prepared to face professional male ball players, though they fared better as time went on. But they drew a lot, writes Kate Fitzgerald in the trade publication Advertising Age. It could be a sheer novelty that's drawing crowds to see the Colorado Silver Bullets women play professional level baseball against men this year. That's what some critics say. But in their second season, the Silver Bullets have gained so many new fans in cities across the US that it's becoming impossible to dismiss them as irrelevant. And in their first season, the Silver Bullets drew upwards of 250,000 fans, with more than 1 million, somewhere between 1 million and 1.5 million, attending during their 4-year stint. Fitzgerald continues, the team had been a promotional jackpot, helping trade awareness for Coors through 20 games broadcast this season on cable TV, plus point of purchase promotions with in-store team appearances. I gotta say, I spent 3 weeks, at least part of every day, looking for some of these point of purchase promotions, because usually you can buy things like this on eBay or vintage advertising sites or what have you. I even just steal a picture. Nobody seems to have saved any of them, but I am not going to stop looking. Okay. Though, as much as Ad Age may have said this, the jackpot was, shall we say, a bit overblown. At the end of the 1997 season, Coors opted to terminate their Silver Bullets sponsorship. According to company spokesman Dave Taylor, Coors chose to focus on its core business of being the country's third largest brewer rather than promoters of women's baseball. Said Taylor, for baseball, that translates into Coors Field, the Rockies, and hometown. The decision has nothing to do with the Silver Bullets. Oh, come on. If you're not going to drop your sponsorship, how can you say it has nothing to do with what you're sponsoring, right? It had everything to do with them. So Coors, which spent roughly $8 million on the team when all was said and done, so that's far more than their original investment, clearly did not see the value in continuing the promotion. The Silver Bullets did have secondary sponsors: Pepsi Cola, Ocean Spray, Lifetime Television, the Women's Sports Foundation, MLB, Reebok, and General Motors among them. Yet they were all tiny little backers, and they couldn't manage to scrape together enough money to keep the team afloat. If you hear a slight amount of bitterness in my tone, maybe it has to do with the other corporate sponsors. But they don't seem to have needed this as much as Coors did for a change in reputation. So did this achieve its goals? I don't know. According to the 1997 annual report, they were doing great. They posted their third straight summer of mid-single digit growth in 1997. For a brand that had been around for so long, that's actually not bad at all. The report continued, the Silver Bullet is a great brand with a solid demographic in the biggest growth segment in the industry. The demographic was solidly made up of men. Men who needed their can to tell them if their beer was cold. Okay. Later Coors advertising and promotions bore this out. The seemingly ungendered Love Train campaign, which has endured for several decades, speaks to people, not bros specifically. But the commercial showing what happens on the train shows that the passengers were mostly women engaged in pillow fights, scantily clad women engaged in pillow fights. And then there was the campaign from the early 2000s, Twins. The jingle goes, and I'm not going to sing it because I might throw up, or you might throw up from hearing me sing. I love football on TV, shots of Gina Lee. This is apparently Gina Lee, hanging with my friends, and twins. And let's just say the twins they're talking about are beautiful young blonde women, not the Minnesota Ball Club. Okay? Clearly, sponsoring women's sports, whether to support women's rights or to sell light beer, was not on the advertising or their departments or their agencies' minds at the time. Their reputation didn't need the silver bullets. Those who boycotted Coors, and those who didn't bought it. So what of Coors Light? What of women's baseball? What of selling Coors Light to women? Well, in 2008, Coors, by then Molson Coors, merged with Miller, essentially buying out the competition. But by then, Bud Light, the ultimate bro beer, had eclipsed both, becoming the top-selling brand nationally. Okay, with its new wedding-centered ad, and Coors Light, who is now calling itself the official light beer of groomsmen everywhere, seem to have been targeting women, even though the whole groomsmen, but people passing out Coors to a mixed gender crowd, even though you mostly see men here, there are plenty of women there, and the officiant is a woman in this ad, is clearly talking to people who may be interested in weddings. Can I just say groomsmen, weddings, bros, not so much. Okay. Coors Light seems to be courting women again. And as we know, women's baseball is alive and well spreading as we wait the Great World Cup, the debut of the new league, etc. The Silver Bullets seem to have constituted an experiment in branding that was designed to fail, but it was a beautiful experiment and could have been much better had it been well managed and had they established two teams to play against each other. Okay, and that is it.
All right, thank you, Roberta. And definitely, feel free to put your hand up if you have any questions, put it in the chat. I see Joshua had a comment here that this really seems similar to kind of what we, I guess, presently refer to as greenwashing or pinkwashing in advertising in terms of, companies kind of trying to portray themselves in a certain light in sort of a disingenuous way. So do you have any comments on that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It seemed to me that this was very specifically, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, pink washing, except that the Silver Bullets were real players and they dressed like players and they tried their best to play. And in their final season, they actually had a winning record. They were, I think, 23 and 22. So
Mm.
they did play.
Perry?
Unmute, Perry.
Yep. All right, there we go. So thank you, Roberta, for answering something that had mystified me for so long, which is that the major disappointment of Coors deciding not to continue sponsoring them was why nobody else stepped up to do it. And I think you're so right. A lot of it has to do with the missed opportunities for merchandising. I mean, they could still be making money off of the Silver Bullets if somebody had just had a head for doing it the way it should have been done. But anyway, this is great. Thank you. You always find these little angles to come at things from that are just so enjoyable and illuminating. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question, Roberta.
Sure.
Do you have a comment first?
No. I,
Oh,
I
okay.
just that I would buy all the crap if somebody
Yeah,
wanted to.
right. I guess, just the way that you describe kind of these, advertising executives, like especially the leaders of these companies, it doesn't seem like they were that, forward thinking in their strategies. Do you think that maybe it could have been an angle that like kind of stereotyping women are the ones that are doing the shopping in the house? So kind of marketing to women in terms of kind of like buying beers for their husbands, was that like entering into their consciousness?
Well, here's what's interesting. Baseball was always sold to women. Women have controlled the purse strings in the house basically since the early 19th century, even since the late 19th century, or since the mid 19th century when advertising was established as an industry. It's always the women who, or it was always the women who controlled the family's purse strings, decided what they spent money on because they did the shopping, or they got their servants to do the shopping. Um, it may have been an attempt to do this. I really think it was more of an attempt to change their reputation because Coors had a horrible reputation. I mean, there was their labor issues. The first boycott of Coors was because they were mistreating Mexican American workers in '66. And the boycotts didn't finish once and for all until recently, and there are still people who won't buy Coors because of the company's policy policies. And I'm not, this was against everyone who wasn't a white man, basically. And they don't like some of the white men either. Let's just put this out there. Um, so it could be both, really,
Hmm.
because yes, you're always trying to get women to buy beer for the men.
Hmm.
But I think they were trying to aim for a younger demographic and they were trying to say, hey, look, we're supporting women's rights now. Come out and buy beer, boycotters, because now we're awesome.
Okay. Kat, do you want to
Yeah,
pose a question?
Roberta, first of all, thank you for doing this. I always love the connection to things like advertising and marketing um, because I'm learning more and more about the importance of that, right? And so, but my question is, I fully buy your interpretation of Coors. In fact, I still don't drink it either. Um, but but the but I'm wondering about, like, what about Bob Hope? What about the Negro brothers? I mean, I I know you may not know the answer to these things, but where do they fit in that narrative?
Well, I'll tell you what, the Negroes were really disappointed when the team folded
Yeah.
because they really believed in this team. They
Hmm.
believed in the players. They
Yeah.
got into it. And obviously, if the team finished with a winning record
Hmm.
against men,
Yep.
they were heading in the right direction.
Right.
Bob Hope was really excited by the idea of women's sports. In fact, he tried to start a women's football team.
Hmm. Yep.
So at least he was still in that area. But
Mm.
when that didn't fly for, I think it was one game, instead of having a whole league, it was like one or two exhibitions. I'm going to look more into this, but this is a direction that I think maybe I'm going to take my research to.
Yeah.
I do know he tried to find new sponsors
Yeah. I
and
just
he was
curious.
willing to
Yeah.
change the name. Yeah.
Right. I'm just curious, like, I mean, you've got and that was I'm glad to hear you say that, because that I thought that about the about the
Mhm.
Negro brothers. But how did they reconcile what Coors was doing, or did they?
I think they may not have thought that long and hard about it, but this is something else I'd like to find out.
Mm. And Leslie had a related question about whether they made any real efforts in their advertising to include the Negro brothers.
Oh yeah.
Ads,
Most
yeah.
yeah, most of their promotion, it was all Negroes all the time. When I
Mm,
was looking for cards of the team, I found more Negro cards than I did cards of the women. Um, this was in every article I read, and I read a lot of articles, though not enough. They were mentioned as, look, these might actually be real ball players because look at who's coaching them.
mm,
Suggesting women could throw a knuckleball, things like that. And I was really surprised to see things like Women's Wear Daily and Ad Age talking about this. Ad Age thought it was a terrific idea in 94, but
mm,
the only coverage they gave the team after that was just a little note in 97 to say that they were folding. In 98
mm,
were folding.
mm.
Because I
Yeah, and
do,
that's.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there was one other question I think people answered in the chat, which was what level of men's teams did they play? And it sounds like kind of a mix of single A, some double A, and then also amateur and high school teams.
Yeah, but they got so walloped by
Hmm.
those, at least at the outset, by those double A teams that,
Mm,
but they did. That's who they played. A mixture of semi-pro, military teams. I found an
mm.
ad about them playing Navy. In fact, I found clips of the game. They were also involved in a major baseball brawl
Oh, interesting.
against the men's team. They played with the men and they quite rightfully reacted like any
Mm,
other baseball player should be reacting.
mm.
You want to brawl, you got to brawl.
Wow.
They
So,
got walloped in the score and then they walloped them back.
right, right.
So
And I,
All right.
when I had one game with the Coors with the Silver Bullets. I think it was in Fishkill where the Hudson Valley Renegades were playing because I was
Mhm.
doing color analysis with Brian Kenny for the Renegades that summer. So I think that might have something to do with why I was asked to umpire. But oh man, I remember Phil Necro coming out on a play, pretty close play at second base, where I called a runner safe. And he came out to me and looked at me with those puppy dog eyes and said, but you know, what about woman sisterhood? And I looked at him, I said, wait a minute, are you asking me to change my call because I'm a woman and your players are women? You know, that I can't do that. I'm sorry. But I almost felt like doing it because he looked so supplicating, you know, like, please help us. But
That's
I got
great.
the impression that he did genuinely respect and care about the women.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's too bad. It was like the first impression became the image, and it was done very poorly, very ineptly. There could have been a lot better planned. Not having the women play against professional men, for one thing, that was a huge mistake because a lot of them individually were just incredibly talented players. Julie Croteau, and yeah, so it was failed. And going back to Donna Cohen's comment about integrity, I think a
Mhm.
lot of it may have had to do with that because, as Roberta pointed out, it was not something that was embedded in their hearts to do something for women. It was like an idea that somebody had that said, yeah, maybe we can make some money. And then they executed it very ineptly and didn't make any money. So for them, that was it. It had served its purpose and didn't pan out, so they abandoned it. But if it had been done properly and with real integrity and devotion behind what they were doing and why they were doing it, it could have just been so different and so much better.
And it might have actually helped the company's reputation
Mm.
because it seemed to me that that's what Coors was after,
Yeah,
and thereby ending boycotts and selling more beers.
yeah, but they didn't see that. For them it was all performative and
Mhm.
nothing genuine about it.
Yep, it's pinkwashing, definitely.
Pink washing. Yeah.
Right, maybe we can take this last question from Joshua before we wrap up here.
Hey, this is Josh. Can you hear me? This is Josh
Yeah.
from
Hi, Josh.
Eugene, Oregon. Hey, how are you? Good to see you, Roberta. Emma says hi, by the way.
Hi to Emma.
For everyone on this, I had coffee with Roberta last year when my daughter, who she was a professor for, graduated from NYU. So
Ah,
And she's
anyway,
awesome.
she is awesome. Thank you. And I will say this just to let you know, she works in DEI at our local school district here, and I say that loudly and proudly even today. Anyway,
Yay,
getting to the
yay,
topic
Emma.
of course though, I put in the chat two links. One about Amendment 2, and I was a history major, and so I was 20 years old in 1992 when Amendment 2 was up. So there are people on this call who probably would remember it better than I, but it's what I didn't realize there was so much other anti-LGBT core stuff before 1992. I was not cognizant of it. That was when I remembered well, I don't know how big a supporter they were then of the amendment to, but what it did was basically say no city in Colorado could pass anti-discrimination laws, and
Mhm.
they got a reputation as, quote, the hate state for it. Well
Mm.
deserved,
Mhm.
I would argue, but I live in Oregon, I can say that. Anyway, so that's one thing I just wanted to point out. And the other, though, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on this, on both of these, is I did find an article in SABR.org, which I also posted up there on, and actually, who's the author?
It's Gay Berlage. I quoted extensively.
Oh, you did? Okay. And I was going to say, I figured probably a bunch of you know that author. I don't know what year it was from, but anyway, it was, you're obviously familiar with and Roberta, but I'm wondering if there is out there, other than this article, and I saw there is a Silver Bullets website, which seems to have not been updated for 23 years. If there has been a book or article written about it, and if not, Roberta, there you go. I mean, you're the person
Uh,
to do it. I don't know.
I'll turn this over to Leslie.
It's the longstanding book. We've been working on Joshua, and Roberta's piece is going to be in that. And so we're hoping to get this out next year.
And I didn't mean to be a ringer, but I thought I'd heard something in the past, so I wasn't sure. So I figured Leslie or Kat, one of you would know something or say something. So thank you. I appreciate it. Great work, Roberta. Great presentation. Great article.
And isn't Gay Berlage, who you worked on the Women's Encyclopedia with, Leslie?
No, Gay's been gone for a long time.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I got her mixed
Yeah,
up.
unfortunately, but I did a presentation with Gay way back in the day, but Gay passed away pretty early on, and so
Who
only
was
had
your
the one.
co-author for the dictionary then, for the encyclopedia?
A friend of mine from the college. He just simply did the editing, and so helped with
Oh,
some of the editing. So his
okay.
name is on there because that's the appropriate. But he didn't actually do any of the research or any of that. It's not his.
Okay.
He was helping with the editing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very generous of you to give him credit that way.
Huh. That's just as important as the rest of
Yeah.
it. So
Yes. Yeah.
all right. Thank you. And thank you to Roberta. That was a great presentation to end on as we are going to take a break for dinner. Thank you, Emily, for being our moderator this afternoon and keeping us on target and rolling us through. And so once again, another wonderful afternoon and we are looking forward to tonight. So we're coming back at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6, 4 are the 3 time zones. To hear from Dr. Harriet Hamilton and then to see our latest pylon as we are developing those. This will be number 7 and the winner of our Dorothy Seymour Mills Lifetime Achievement Award. So those will all be done tonight. So enjoy your break and we'll see you all back here at 7 p.m. sharp.